today we're really excited to have Kayleigh Tick, our UI UX designer here at Brilliance. My name is Jared Heck, but I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing. I'm the most uninteresting one here, so I'm going to pass it right away to Lori McDonald, our CEO and founder.
You're funny, Jared. So a little bit about me. I started Brilliance more than 20 years ago. I went to Purdue in computer electrical engineering and ended up through an internship at NASA Johnson Space Center, eventually where I worked as a flight controller for the space shuttle program. And I ended up relocating to Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my husband, who I met at NASA and eventually went to work for Rockwell Automation. He had a job promotion that brought us here. And that was in 1998. And I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And so I decided to start a web development company. What we found was that because of my technical background, we were a good fit for working with manufacturers and distributors, and specifically helping them implement online ordering. That became a niche for us as B2B e-commerce. And our business grew, and eventually my husband left his job at Rockwell and he came and joined us 9 years ago, and now he leads our development team. What's really interesting with respect to the conversation we're having today is that when I started Brilliance and early on in those conversations with manufacturers and distributors, part of our rationale in choosing B2B as a space in part was because the creative design side of things wasn't really a strong part of my skill set. And the reality is that most manufacturers and distributors at that time were less concerned about how things looked, and they just really wanted things to work. And they had a lot of technical complexity that I and our team had skills to fill. And that's really changed over the last 20 years. Both attitudes around it have changed. Also, I'm happy to say Brilliance with regards to that has changed too, which is why I'm so excited that we have Kayleigh here with us today, because she's really helped us to add a lot more skills and talent around how we approach user experience for our customers. So Kayleigh, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Lori. So I previously worked as a digital designer in the marketing department for Trusted Media Brands, also known as Reader's Digest Association. And after that, I was really excited about moving more towards user experience and user interface design, which is how I came to be here. A lot of my role, it's partially front-end development work, and it's partially custom design work. A lot of researching like past UX practices to incorporate into design, and a lot also assisting with existing sites when they're trying to implement new features. It's really helpful to have that UX focus when you're trying to think of how to improve a specific item in a site that already exists as well.
Can you tell us the differences between UI and UX?
Sure. So UI stands for user interface and UX stands for user experience. And they're both really closely tied together, but there are definitely differences. And it's really helpful to be considering both of them when you're designing a new website or updating an existing website. And it's you can't just have a design without thinking about the user experience, and it really does all relate together. The interesting thing that Lori mentioned earlier, that people don't really think about design. They just want things to work well. I think today a lot of people have realized that things working well is good design and is good user experience, and you really need all of them together in order to create something that your customers are going to be happy with.
Yeah, I used to have biases around the fact that I thought design was a lot of money to spend on things that looked pretty. The reality is that good design, and there can be times when a lot of money is spent on making things look pretty. That happens, but I think also there is there a lot of really good design work that is spent on making a site easier for customers to use, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that's really the difference. That's where UX comes into UI, is making sure that you're not just making things look pretty for the sake of design, but you're doing it for a purpose that's going to help your users and make your website easier to use.
We typically work with manufacturers and distributors, and again, going back to this whole story of we've always operated with a minimalistic approach around design. Why does design matter to manufacturers and distributors?
So good design is good UX. Design is different from user experience, but if you're going to have a good user experience, that you have to have a good design backing that up. And with that good user experience, you're going to lead to increased sales on your site and a happier customer. And that's really the important parts of design, how it relates to manufacturers and distributors.
Well, I've realized more recently that wasn't always my understanding is that the things that I think of as technical actually have implications in terms of design. I typically would think of like design as a creative function, which it is in part, but the technical pieces have to be there to make that experience really work.
Yeah, you definitely need both. There was something that I learned a long time ago, and if your website looks nice, your customers are actually more likely to give your site more time if something isn't working right away than they would with a bad design, but you still need that functionality to be there or people will end up leaving. So good design can also just buy you some time to work through certain functionality issues, but at the core, you do need to have a site that works well too.
How organizations can start incorporating UX into your business, and if you could touch on companies who have someone internally that can support them versus someone or an organization that doesn't have anybody.
Our team, when I started, before that, there wasn't no one on the team to fill that role, and I think it's really interesting all the different ways that I've been able to help out in my role. I think it might have been a lot more than you might have initially even thought you
Definitely.
had.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing is I don't just work on creating designs for new customers. We also have a lot of existing customers who want to make improvements, and a lot of just questions will come up. What's the best way to do this? How can we think about this a different way? And that's where you can really jump in and give feedback. So, I mean, I'd say if you have someone on your team, that's great. If you aren't there yet in your business, I think it's possible to, find the people on your team who really care about your users and their experience and involve them in more of those decisions when you have questions on how things should work.
Yeah, one of the things I really value about you, Kayleigh, is you ask really good questions. And you get us to think about things differently and give us kind of a different perspective to remind us of like, what's this experience going to be like for the user? And even if there are people at a company who might not have a UX background specifically, there are still potentially people in an organization that can ask good questions or might be close to their customer base, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can speak from personal experience. I've had the opportunity to play customer at Brilliance the last couple months as we're going through a web redesign internally here. And I've had the pleasure of having Kayleigh point out a few things and make sure that we've made some improvements before launch. So to Lori's point, Kayleigh has this innate ability to ask really good questions around things that you wouldn't even think about when you're approaching a design. What would you say are the 3 most dangerous UX traps that you should avoid?
Yeah, so first, I'd say never assume that you know your user's intentions. And a fun example, I think Netflix is one of the better streaming services out there, but they do have a feature where if you're on a show, they start auto-playing it. And so they're assuming that you want to continue to play that show when that might not necessarily be the case. And I think you can really tie that to anything on your site. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to, wonder what your user's intentions might be. I'm sure somebody at Netflix was like, let's reduce the amount of clicks, from someone looking at a show to watching it. And could be where that came out of. But to me, sometimes it's frustrating. I'm not ready to watch the show yet. I'm getting dinner ready. I just want to pause it. So it's okay to make those assumptions, but it's important to not put a lot of stake into them and to make sure that you're following up with your users on whether or not that's actually helping them or if it's frustrating for them. So the second thing is underutilizing personalization on your website. So if you do have personalization capabilities, that can be really valuable, and it can improve your user's experience on your site too. It's a lot more valuable for a customer to see something that's targeted to them, to what they've been looking for, than just seeing a blank slate that everybody else sees. And really good UX should always come back to the user, and the more you know about them, the better interactions you can have. So I think personalization started as just being like, you would see someone, your first name would be in an email, and that would feel super personalized, but there's so much more that you could do today than just that. And then, if you don't necessarily have personalization capabilities on your site, it still comes back to, your user, and the more that you know about them, the better. So if you can use something like Google Analytics or any like data-driven information to learn about your users and make decisions based on that information, then you can make adjustments to your site in the like key areas that really matter to your customers.
That's such a great point, because obviously we work with technology that has, like Episerver has a lot of capabilities around personalization. Not everyone we work with is on Episerver or has those capabilities, but if you have them, leveraging them to really make a user experience that really resonates with your user, like where they feel like you're speaking to them or know exactly what they need, or you're presenting them with information that's exactly what they were looking for. Can be really powerful. But even people that don't have that technology, like even just being in the mindset of like, how can we create some content that's going to most speak to, what we know about our user? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then the third thing that I would say, as far as a dangerous UX trap to avoid, is thinking that you're done with your website at launch. Because as soon as you launch your site, you're going to get so much more information about your users and how they're interacting with your website, and your customer needs could change. You could also get data from real customer interactions that's really invaluable. If you have customers who provide feedback to you on your new website, that's also great information to have. And to continue making updates, a website should be a living, breathing thing. It's not just you finish it and it's done. It's really valuable when you can keep learning and keep making adjustments and improving on it.
So pre-COVID, the idea of speed to market and driving additional revenue to your website were always important. People always wanted to get things launched quickly and start making money off of whatever they're launching. However, now, because of the situation that we're all living in, those two ideas have really amplified, and we're taking them seriously as an organization as well. Do you have any improvements that they can make as an organization to drive more revenue?
Yeah, I think there are a number of improvements that they can make. One is having your phone number visible on your website. If that's something that you're able to do, that you have a customer service team who's able to make those calls for you, it can be really valuable. A lot of customers, they have different needs. Some customers are going to prefer to research online, and some are going to really value that phone interaction. And being able to do that will be able to make those customers happier.
To me, this one is so interesting because on the one hand, it seems so simple, and yet in so many places I go to websites and it really is not easy necessarily to find their phone number. I think for some companies that's actually intentional in that they're trying to save money on like customer service costs or calls and drive more online. And even though our world is increasingly digital, and obviously I believe in the power of digital, but if you have someone on your site and they're struggling either with it, they're on their phone, and for some, maybe your mobile experience isn't great, or they really just need to ask a question. finding a way to help them get to someone who can help them place that order is important. I think sometimes there's a thought like, well, let's save money by not, making our phone number super visible, having to pay for that customer service team. To me, the question is like, how much more money could you be making if you're capturing those orders? And it's interesting to me how potentially UX improvements actually has operational implications for a business too.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing, with the phone number, we were talking about those two different types of customers who one might really value that phone interaction and one might be okay just looking at your site. So the other improvements also relate to those different types of users. And, it is important to recognize that you have multiple types of users who are visiting your site, and it's good to kind of think about who they are. So second, I would say having quick order is really valuable for your existing customers who know exactly what they want. It makes it really easy for them to just enter their product information and check out and bypass everything else because they already know what the products are. They have probably already ordered them before, and it just makes it really easy for them to get to that checkout process. Versus a new customer might not know exactly what they want or might be doing research on your products and products on another site. So it's really important to build out a product page, which is what I would say the third improvement would be. If you can put a lot of information on your product page that's really valuable to your users, that's going to be really helpful for that customer that's new and doing research and looking into different options that they can have.
In the B2B space, oftentimes there's so much detail that companies have offline, between spec sheets and product attributes, and thinking through the way to best share that information on their product pages can be really important.
And the fourth thing that I would say to improve your site, everyone is going to have a different design, and that's a good thing. And different people on your team might have different design opinions on what works better, whether it's a button color or if it should be a button versus a link. I think all those opinions can be really valuable. And it's good if you have the capabilities to A/B test that. That can get you a lot of valuable information because design it doesn't seem very quantitative. It's something that just looks nice and adds to your site. And if you don't do any type of testing, it's really hard to figure out what changes helped improve, conversions and things like that for your users. So it's great to just continue to think about your design and those small changes that you can make and see and learn from, what works better. Are videos in your hero images better? Does that help your customers more, or is it an image better? It's great information to have and try out.
Yeah, I know. I remember, Kayleigh, we had a conversation once when Brilliance had a video we wanted to put on our homepage, and there's information out there around, videos are good to have them. No, videos aren't good, and it'll slow your site down, but it'll really attract people. And I think when you're in those kinds of conflicts around, we've got these ideas and what should we do, being able to measure and have data to figure out what's best is really important.
Could you maybe touch on a few things or a few ideas, approaches for how you can leverage data to continue to improve your UX?
Setting up Google Analytics is great. Doing A/B testing, and you might not have enough traffic for A/B testing, and that's also okay. You can still make a change and look at your before and after results on your website. But whether you're doing A/B testing or changing one thing at a time, it's important to phase that out so that you're getting accurate information on a specific piece. Because if you just change everything at once, you're not going to know what's changing the data that you get from that update.
Mm-hmm. I've talked with clients who are like, oh, I don't have money for A/B testing, or like user testing, I know is something else that comes up, where there are software systems that can help you do like user testing that'll automate that process of collecting that information for you. And yet there are also really low budget ways to do it. Like my mind goes to, it's better to do something than nothing at all, right? It's better to be figuring out what data you can get, even if you're getting on a go-to-meeting with a customer and like watching them go through your site and like hearing their experience.
Steps that organizations can take to evaluate and improve your site. Can you go through maybe some things that organizations can start to do as they realize it's time to make a change?
Yeah, and we've touched on this a little bit, but it's important to start with one feature. You know, don't try to do too much at once, otherwise you're not going to get accurate information on that. And then look at any data that you already have to learn more about what you might like to improve on that particular item. If you want to make a change to your homepage and you decide that you think making bigger buttons and a video in your hero would be really valuable, you don't want to do both of those things at once, or you won't necessarily get accurate information on which one, you know, helped or hurt. And so the first thing to do is identify all those points that you want to change. And then the next step is to try to do research, anything that you have available to you. So that can just be searching online. It could be user testing or asking for feedback from your customers, and you know, come up with a hypothesis of what you think will make an improvement and make a better user experience and eventually drive more revenue. And then you make those changes and roll them out one at a time and see what works.
The engineer in me is like, yes, like design can also be like very scientific.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, and I could walk through, so I went through a similar process. We have something called Catalyst, which is what we use to launch our Episerver client projects, and we're always trying to make improvements to that. The method is slightly different because we're not changing an existing website, we're changing a starting point for our customers, but it's still important to do that research, you know, identify what you'd like to improve and ways that you think you could change it, instead of rolling things out one by one. You know, it'll all be grouped together for us because it's a product that gets changed for every client.
Mm-hmm.
But I can show some designs and walk through some decisions that I made and why I made those decisions. So the first thing, I was thinking about improving our base checkout process in Catalyst. And I wanted to think not just about the checkout page, but also about mini cart and shopping cart. And so our current mini cart shows customers their 3 most recent products that they've added to the list. And I thought it would be really nice to be able to see all of those items. I think part of the reason why we limited it to 3 initially was because we didn't want this dialog box to go way far down the page, because that would be a bad user experience. But thinking about it a different way, these buttons for shopping cart and checkout and the total price can be fixed to the bottom of the screen, and then you can scroll to view all of your products. Another thing that we thought would be beneficial to add is this move to list link. Lists can be really valuable, especially to B2B clients, because different people might be looking at the same site for different departments. There could be a lot of different users interacting with your website for their same company. And so being able to group items in lists is really valuable. And being able to easily do that from the mini cart and the shopping cart seems like a really nice added bonus. So this really doesn't change a lot from what we had previously. We left the move to list that was also in the mini cart. And another thing that I read while doing research is that having an update button next to your quantity can really negatively impact your user experience, because a lot of users might not realize that they have to click that button. And you don't want someone to all of a sudden change this to 20 items and forget to click update and not get the items that they needed. And then if you proceed to checkout, this is where a lot of the changes that I made are a lot of the research that I read, especially in a B2B site, you're going to have a lot more information that you need to fit into checkout, and it's helpful to chunk that in a certain way. So that you've seen a lot of sites that do a multi-step checkout. That is one way of chunking information together. I thought it would be nicer to do this accordion style, because you're chunking it together so that it's not, you're not having too much cognitive overload for your clients, but you're not hiding any information where they'd have to go back and, possibly lose out information that they've entered if they wanted to view a previous part of the checkout process. These were just different ways, you can go to the next step, but then click back on the first step. I hope that gives you a good idea of what I thought about and the research that I did when trying to make improvements to our own product.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Great examples. And we appreciate everyone taking the time to connect with us today. And if you do come up with additional questions, you feel free to contact us directly, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you, Kayleigh, for being our guest. We really appreciated it, and take care.